This is Open Door with Vince Robinson. In-depth conversations with people who are making a difference in the lives of others here and around the world. Culture is at the heart of who you are. Know your culture, find yourself on Open Door with Vince Robinson.
Grand dawning, great rising, Cleveland, Ohio, and the rest of planet Earth. Welcome to another edition of Open Door with Vince Robinson. My guest is someone who was born and raised here in Cleveland, but has spent most of her adult life out of Cleveland, but she came back, and she came back to do something significant in the community. The community that we're speaking of is Hough, and we're going to talk about the Hough community and things that are going on right now. She is the owner of Invigorate Gallery over there on Hough Avenue, and we're going to bring you up to speed with what's going on there. So welcome to Open Door with Vince Robinson, Antunesia Harris. How you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for welcoming me. I really do appreciate it.
All right. And right off the bat, I have to mention, because I'm doing my homework, and I noticed that you are actually the granddaughter of Robert Lockwood Jr., who is a historical figure right here in Cleveland. What's it like to be the granddaughter of royalty?
Oh, my goodness. It's actually been awesome. It's been just like this wonderful experience. The story of how he became my grandfather is that my grandmother met him when he was in his early 20s, and he's always been a musician in Arkansas, and she had a crush on him. She told one of her friends, hey, I want to meet him, and I like him. And the message that came back was she was too young. She still had milk on her breath. And so he was not interested in dating her. Interesting enough, they both wound up in Cleveland, Ohio. And they would meet again many years later. She went to all of his shows. Actually, all of my family sort of went to shows and spent time with both Robert and his first wife, Annie. When Annie passed away, he reached out to my grandmother and said, hey, are you still interested? So they actually got married really late in life. But he was always a part of our family. So it was really a great experience to have them married. And so even for myself, I had the opportunity of traveling with Grandpa and meeting so many blues greats over the years. They actually became my friends. So it's been a wonderful experience. And I think the other great experience has been the love that Cleveland has shown to my grandfather over so many years. It's just been really one of the best parts for me of the city has been the love that has been shown to him.
That's interesting. So your exposure to your grandfather probably also immersed you in the music of the blues.
Absolutely. I love the blues. I mean, I play blues music and I love the music from, the historical point of view, but also just the soul and the energy of the music. And then I had this wonderful experience of meeting many of the artists who made the music. So, yeah, I do have a heart for the blues.
Yes, it's definitely grown folks' music, and it is music that resonates with our community, particularly among the elders. But it's just heartwarming to hear you have such an affinity to that genre of music that sometimes goes unnoticed. We have the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and the emphasis on rock, but, the blues is the basis of a lot of music like jazz, like gospel, and it's probably got some elements that affected the evolution of rock music as well. So, yes, indeed. So you are the owner of Invigorate Gallery. It is a gallery right there in the heart of Hough. Can you tell us about that gallery and what's going on with it as we speak?
Well, it's actually really, it's Invigorate Art Gallery, but it's really at this point an experiment. It's a social experiment for me to get a sense of what happens when you turn a vacant lot into an art gallery. And so people have asked about what's happening on the inside of the building, and not much. I mean, the building itself for me is a frame. And the vacant lot next door, which is really no longer vacant because I do have the ability to do installations of art. I have the ability to host people and host events. So it's nothing, there's nothing traditional about what I'm doing there. And for me, again, it's still quite a bit of experimenting. And so at this time, I started last year looking at what is the connection between African Americans in America and Africa itself. And I thought of this concept because of the year of the return. So you had hundreds of thousands of Americans going to Africa for the first time, and that Africa was actually Ghana. You know, we do know Africa as a continent, but you had hundreds of thousands of Black people, Black folks going to Ghana, and I was one of them. And so we're celebrating at this point, I believe it's maybe 10 years since the year of the return. And so I kind of look back at that time. So right now I have some artwork from Nana Kwasi, who is in Cleveland, who I just sort of met when he showed up in Cleveland and as an artist. And of course, I love art, and we started to talk. And so I put some of his artwork out there, and the work that he did for the artwork that's in the yard now is really focused on the Adinkra symbols from Ghana, which is one of the earliest written languages. And so I'm doing some just work around that. And I'm also inviting people, and any of your listeners who did actually venture to Ghana for the year of return, I would love to include some of your pictures and some of your experiences in the show that is forming around that. What did it mean for people who, for visiting the continent for the first time? And to a place that was very welcoming. So I'm inviting people to send pictures, to talk to me about their experiences. So that's what we're doing now. The other part is I'm really interested in this concept of the fragility of democracy. And what are the things that make democracy fragile? And we can start with banned books. We can look at all of these issues that are happening with women and their right or wish to have an abortion. And so I think that what I do, again, is really experimenting with concepts. And I always invite people to come into the space to do what it is they want to do. That's why it's there. So I don't have like a solid formula.
Well, it's so ironic that we're having this conversation because the year of return was actually 2019, and it was 400 years since 1619. That's why they came up with that designation. And in 2019, I went to Ghana. As a matter of fact, I want to say in 2019, while I was in Ghana, I met Nana Kwasi that you're speaking of.
Yes.
Jari. So I actually have some pictures that I took in Ghana. They're framed and matted and everything and ready for installation. How about that?
Well, you know what? I would love to blast some images off of the building. Again, let's think outside of the box. Like, how can we have an experience with art that isn't so traditional? What happens if we're able to blast your images off of the walls of the building and invite other people to do the same thing? How then do we impact a neighborhood or a community? I think that doing something like that, you have a lot of people that drive by. And so now it's Vince Robinson. What are these images? Where is this person? And I think we need to have a little bit more of that. We need to start to invite people to join in the experience of the expression of art, however that is. And I think you do that by lowering the barriers to entry. And so I think that's the experiment that I'm doing. I spend a lot of years selling art, and I never sold one piece. I always sold multiple pieces. And the way that I sold multiple pieces was I would talk to people who had never purchased a piece of art before, and help them understand that now this person that they're buying, this artwork, this is their person, this is their artist, that they should be interested in their career. And I would say, hey, when you graduate from college or when you get a promotion or when you get married, this is the artist you should look back on. And if it's not this artist, there should be another artist. But, buying art is a way to sort of mark milestones in your own personal life and helping people understand that you're feeding this artist. You're helping them to continue on. This is not feeding a corporation. And so, yeah, I would sell quite a few pieces of artwork, sometimes over the course of many years, because people would buy the first piece of artwork when they're graduating from college, and then they're pregnant and they're calling and saying, "Hey, I'm pregnant and I want something," and quite often, people have more money as they age, or they gain a different type of interest in art. I have people that have reached out because they are serious about investing in artists, and they are a lot more interested in artists to make investments in, and they're spending, $5,000 to $10,000 on artwork. And I have people that are simply, attracted to a particular artist or style, and they want more abstract work. So, I think that for me, I spend a lot of time helping people understand the value of and in art, not only in the purchasing, but doing something for yourself.
Yes.
Having the ability to see a piece of art and you having a real relationship or emotion as a result of that artwork. So
yes,
I think that with this particular experiment, again, how do we help people understand that this image that they love, that Vince Robinson took, is something that they can have in their office or in their home, and why there's value to doing that. So, yeah, I would love to see your images.
Okay.
Blasted.
Well, I did a couple of exhibitions, two exhibitions, solo exhibitions at Kent State University in 2017 and 2019. And both times I brought images of people in Ghana and places in Ghana, just so people could get a sense of what it is like over there. But the other thing that I wanted to mention, when you talk about the connection between Africans and African Americans, it's really vital right now because, first of all, we're all one people, and we tend to look at each other as being separate. But I'm sure that through your connection with Nana Ajari, you can see how much we have in common and how this wedge between us is something that needs to be removed just so that we can create the unity that will move us forward as a people. Africans have been affected by colonialism and other measures that employ racism, just as African Americans have been affected by Jim Crow racism and all those other kinds of things. We, on both sides of the ocean, have that in common, and that common bond is something that we can utilize to move our agenda forward, because we have to. Otherwise, we'll continue to suffer at the hands of those who would want to exploit us as people, exploit the resources of the continent in those 55 different countries, and the other things that are happening in the world. Quite interesting discussion, and I want to talk more about the gallery. I also want to talk to you about gentrification and the changes in the landscape of Hough, because as we have this conversation, it's kind of being redefined, and that's one of the reasons that it's so important for you to have your space there and to amplify art and the artists that live in this community. We're going to talk more about that when we return. You're listening to Open Door with Vince Robinson on 95.9 FM WOVU. My guest is Antunesia Harris. She is the owner of the Invigorate Art Gallery in Hough. We'll be right back on this Burton Belcar community radio station right after this.
Hi, this is Tammy Payton, the CEO and founder of Pillars to Success Incorporated. You are listening to 95.9 FM WOVU, Our Voices United, Burton Belcar Community Radio.
Welcome back to Open Door with Vince Robinson and the conversation with my guest, Antunesia Harris, who is also a friend of mine, Nana Ajari, an artist that I met over there in Ghana, and we made that connection actually before I got there. But when he came to America, he did his very first exhibition at Larchmere Arts. I was happy to host him there, and I'm happy to have him return. I see that you've connected with him, and now his artwork is singing in your space, and I think that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes. So you have featured some other artists. I know I swung by one day a couple years ago. Maybe it was last year, maybe it was the year before, but you had the artistry of Dale Good up in your space. What are you exhibiting now?
Well, that was, the Dale Good thing. It was just warmed my heart to have the ability to give Dale space to make work. growing up, this, let me go back and say this. My connection to art really started, and my connection to art, like outside of the gallery space, started as a child. My family lived on East 99th in St. Clair, and right at the corner was Reverend Albert Wagner. And so I grew up watching Reverend Wagner make artwork, and sometimes people wouldn't recognize it as artwork. He was somewhat of he could sometimes scream at people in the neighborhood and be a little rough, but he was literally always very nice to me. And so when he said he was an artist, I believed him, and other people would say, oh, he's not doing anything. The man is crazy. And I would say, well, he said he's an artist. He's an artist. And so I sort of grew up watching this man get out in the morning, move things around. And it dawned on me relatively recently that, oh, my God, I've turned into him because I'm doing some of the same things. People don't understand what I'm doing or why I'm doing it, but I'm still doing it. With Dale Good, the thing that happened is Dale was making work in vacant lots, and he's done it, I think, quite a bit. And his process is very messy, and sometimes it can get very uncontrolled. And when I rolled up on Dale at a lot in the central neighborhood, he was being evicted. And I said, okay, listen, I have a lot. It's mine. It's a private lot. Let's get you over there and you can make some stuff and we can show stuff. And I asked Dale, I said, the agreement between us was that he would keep the gates open and he would communicate with people in the neighborhood. And so I wanted people in the neighborhood to see a working artist. And Dale, as a working artist, isn't a working artist who doesn't sell work and whose work doesn't have a value. It does. And so it was really great for people to not understand what he was doing, then to have conversations with him, and then to show he has representation and that his works have, value and people buy them, and to talk about abstraction. And, so for me, again, it's a lot of experimenting with me. And Dale made some of probably the biggest sculptures of his life in the space that I have. And Dale sold work in that space. I did not ask for any money from that sale of the work. The work that he created, some of it dealt with domestic violence. And it was just incredible that people would come in, they wouldn't know exactly what it was. I could have a conversation with them about what they were seeing. Dale did a lot of his sculptures on doors. And the question was, what happens behind closed doors in domestic violence? And the reaction was incredible. You had people that shared how domestic violence had impacted their lives. There was a man who was 80 years old and said that the last time he saw his mother, his father had shot at her and said, if I see you again, I'll kill you. That man started to cry. He did not know if his father had murdered his mother or not. And so I personally wasn't prepared for some of the emotions that happened as a result of Dale's work being there, but there was quite a bit. And so that's the thing. Art has this ability to communicate things. This gentleman talked to me about domestic violence, and he said it was the first time he'd really opened up with anyone about it. So the work that Dale created was abstract work, which is his way. And I had this wonderful opportunity to talk about abstraction and other artists who are abstract artists, and how to connect and relate to that work. So unfortunately, I'm not sure if I answered your question, but I'm happy to talk about Dale, and happy I was able to actually lend him a hand with this work.
Well, the other part of the question is what you have up now.
Oh, okay. So up now, what happens is, again, I'm experimenting. So when an artist creates something, I put those things out front and center and kind of make the highlight. Then I put them sort of in the backdrop. So there are some pieces that Dale created that are still in the space, primarily the work dealing with domestic violence and the work dealing with these times in life when you have to flee. And incidentally, the name of the show for Dale's work was called Gumption and Grit, which was the gumption of Dale, this Black man who started out saying, I'm an artist, and the world said, no, you're not. You need to be a driver. You need to be a sweeper. And Dale continued on, without having money for tools. And he really, to me, has created a process, this process of where he is putting these multiple layers of paint onto fabric. He's creating these sculptures that are impenetrable by water. So that's his particular process. So you'll see some of his work there. You also will see some of Nana's work there. Again, a lot of the Invigorate symbols. I'm putting up some more over this weekend, actually. And then you'll also see an artist who just happened by, who was from Brazil. He was a visiting artist. And I asked if he could quickly make something for me, and he did. So that's what's there now. But I'm always open for people that want to show. The thing for me is that it's really a space for other people to do what they want to do. So if there are any artists that want to show work, it's not like this super ideal space. The space is what it is, and you can do whatever you want in the space. And again, I don't charge people to do that. What I do ask is that folks don't do sort of exclusive things. I would like for people in the neighborhood to have the ability to have access.
Yeah, the access is so important. Access to the community and access to the artist as well. We have a Cleveland Museum of Art, but how many times do you go into the Cleveland Museum of Art and see work by a Cleveland artist? Rarely. Yeah. It's ironic that it's that way, but then when you look at the way they schedule exhibitions and so forth and so on, and they got stuff scheduled 2 or 3 years out, if you're knocking on a door, it's like, stand in line, come back later. And in the meantime, your art doesn't get shown, and then the people don't get the opportunity to see your art. One thing that I wanted to mention is an exhibition that was at Severance Hall. It was the photography of Chuck Stewart, who is an iconic photographer that many people have never heard of. And I'll be honest, prior to this year, I had never heard of him. But what resonated with me about him is that we have both been people who have photographed musicians. I've been shooting musicians since 1980 something. And to see another photographer whose body of work is just phenomenal. But the problem is that exhibition was at Severance Hall, and the only way that you could see it is if you bought a ticket to an event at that venue. And it's the home of the Cleveland Orchestra. So, folks in Hough, I'm not saying everybody, but for the most part, we not going to Severance Hall to listen to classical music. Let's face it. All those children who could have benefited from seeing that exhibition, they couldn't see it. But they needed to see it. And so what you're doing with the gallery is so important because it provides access for artists, and it also provides access for community. And the other thing is that it's not such an intimidating experience. When you go to the Cleveland Museum of Art, you might get lucky and find a meter. If you don't find a meter, you got to go into the garage and you got to pay through the nose to park your car just so you can be exposed to the art. And then when you get into the museum, you have to pay sometimes to see exhibitions. I remember when they did an exhibition a couple years ago involving hair. It involved black hair. You had to pay to see that exhibition. How sad that is, to have all these people living around University Circle and then be ostracized by bureaucracy and all that other stuff. I'll step off of my soapbox, but I just wanted to put that out there.
I find, so this is a really interesting conversation for me. Like I said, art has been a part of my life for a very long time, but I'm not an academic. My approach is not an academic approach. My approach has been as a fan. And so I'm in this weird space now that I'm trying to create something when that's really not what I've done. I've traveled to Europe for art. I've gone, I go everywhere for art. I went to see the Mona Lisa because you should see the Mona Lisa, So I've spent a lot of time in museums in Europe and Africa and all over, and galleries as well. So I hear exactly what you're saying, Vince, but for me, I don't feel so much as that it's a shame that these institutions aren't doing more. I think they're doing what they they do. Can they do more? I think they can, but I think that is a bit of the way they operate is their role. I think that what we do need is, again, a little more experimental things when it comes to art. I think your space is great. I mean, you have a small space, you have wonderful shows, wonderful galleries. We need more of those things. Personally, I would like to see something like that in every neighborhood. As far as me, like I said, I have to be honest with you. I grew up with artists encouraging me in Cleveland. When I was 16 or 17, it was Alice Seifler. I walked into her space and she was like, "You're a woman. You don't have to get married. You can move away. You can do anything you want." And so these little words of encouragement from these artists that just seem to just have so much energy. And to be honest with you, Alice was about 50 when I met her. And so I'm 50 for the second time. And here I am telling people, you don't have to do anything. You can do whatever you want. I have a great relationship with Edward Parker, who, again, became my Oba, my godfather, when I was in my 30s. And, you know, he has this space, and he has commercial, and he has residential. And, you know, so I have a lot of strong relationships with artists. Again, Reverend Wagner was just this phenomenal person for me to spend a good deal of time with over the years. Again, you know, just sort of as a human being, someone whose work that I admire a lot, and I'm so happy to have a few pieces, is Lawrence Baker. So this ideal of Cleveland and people who are here, you're absolutely right. Like, I would love to be a space where these masters are housed, because when I go to different cities, the first thing that I'm Googling is Black-owned art gallery, and then other art galleries. But I start off with Black-owned art galleries. I start off with, you know, if I'm in a Hispanic area, Brazilian artists or Hispanic, you know, this is what I do. And I'm not the only one. There's hundreds and thousands of us. And so in Cleveland, it is difficult. I mean, I would have to, people have come to visit me in Cleveland, people that like art, because I know these people, we have to then go to people's homes to see their work. This is not terrible, but it's just not the most ideal. So I would love to be a space where some of what I consider masters are on display. And at any time, there is that opportunity to connect with them. We do know that this post-Black Lives Matter, there was this tremendous interest in Black artists, and galleries need to diversify, and we need to have more Black artists. It boggled my mind when I went to Art Basel a few years ago, and all the Black artists were from Africa. I don't have any problems with artists being from Africa and you know, getting their just due, but what about Alice Seifler? What about Reverend Albert Wagner? What about Lawrence Baker?
What about us? What about us?
And the thing for me is what I see as the whole is that the representation. None of these people that are named have decent or good representation. And so, how do you see them?
Okay.
Hold
that thought, because you're telling me something that I need to know, and I think the listening audience does too. You're listening to Open Door with Vince Robinson. I'm with Antunesia Harris. We're having a great conversation about art, and it will resume when we return. This is 95.9 FM WOVU, Burton Bell Carr Community Radio.
This is DJ Chris Dowles, Programs and Music Director here at WOVU 95.9 FM. Our Voices United, a Burton Bell Carr Community Radio station. WOVU 95.9 FM sends a big thank you to the entire staff of the St. Luke's Foundation and President and CEO Timothy Tramble for awarding WOVU 95.9 FM $25,000 to purchase the WOVU 95.9 FM mobile vehicle. On behalf of our entire team, our Executive Director, Joy Johnson, and Executive Board, we said thank you, St. Luke's Foundation, for continuing addressing social determinants of health for our people in our neighborhoods and throughout Cuyahoga County. Thank you. This message is being brought to you by WOVU 95.9 FM, Our Voices United, a Burton Bell Carr Community Radio station.
We're back on Open Door, and Antunesia is telling us that there need to be places in Cleveland for artists who are from Cleveland. She mentioned some of the masters. She mentioned Ed Parker and Lawrence Baker. I'm going to add to that equation, and you mentioned Alice Seifler as well. I'm going to add to that equation someone whose work has just completely knocked me over, and that is Thomas Hudson. This brother, he creates works of art that are so precise and so detailed they look like photographs. It's just phenomenal. You got folks like Jerome White, same thing, and he's really getting his shine on. He teaches art, I think, at Cleveland Heights High School, but he's got a number of projects in place right now, including some work that's up in the University Circle area. So absolutely, we need to have more places that feature Black art, and I'm going to shout out Deep Roots Gallery over there at 79th and Central. They're doing great things to put Black artists on the map. There are a few other galleries that don't come to mind yet, but I'm really pleased to say that we are creating spaces for art, because we can't always wait for someone to do it for us. We have to take initiative and create those spaces, and then bring folks in and, let them get the benefit of what art does. I want to pivot a little bit and talk about, since we're talking about placemaking and placekeeping, what's happening in the Hough community right now, because there's conversation on the street and in the newspaper about the Cleveland Foundation's footprint in that area. And you've got folks like Ron Fuqua over there who is making a case for honoring Leo's Casino and creating a space for artists to do whatever they need to do. What are your thoughts about how Hough is evolving and being redefined?
It's an interesting question. This is, to be honest with you, I've tried to come back home to Cleveland several times, and I just couldn't do it. The city it just didn't feel like a good place for me. That was particularly when I was younger. I'm a lot older now. I've slowed down a lot, and the city is actually picking up, and there's this, what I think is a wonderful heartbeat. In my sort of spending more time in the city of my birth, I've actually fallen in love with what's happening in this moment, because I think that this has been just the best moment with conversations around equity and inclusion. The challenge, though, is those conversations have to translate into action. And that's always difficult. I think that for me, like in my space, if I had a better space, I would want to show documentaries on gentrification. I mean, this gentrification that Cleveland is going through, hey, Harlem and these other places went through it 20 years ago. I think that there's a lot to learn. There have been things that have been put into place in other places that I think Cleveland can benefit from. The way in which people organize, the way in which the community speaks and dance together, the way in which the city comes up with programs and opportunities to ensure that people have affordable housing. I personally, it's difficult for me to talk about these things because I'm really a citizen. I don't have any professional connection to these things. I'm just the citizen walking down the street, experiencing them like other people. So, but I would say in the Hough neighborhood, it feels in one respect exciting. But then in the other respect, it's also just tremendously challenging because you're talking about a neighborhood where the average income is maybe $24,000 or less. And that's average. However, you have these outliers. So I'm curious to know, because I don't know the answers to what is the city doing to ensure that people who work at days will have the ability to buy a home. I lived in D.C., and one of the benefits about living there was, you had these opportunities. There's a program where you can receive $60,000 to put down on a home. This makes a big difference if a home is a $200,000 home or a $150,000 home. I don't see Cleveland doing any of those innovative things. I've looked at documentaries from places like Brooklyn and other places that have gentrified where citizens were able to form coalitions and to speak with one voice about, their neighborhoods. So it's hard to say, but I do think that the bright spots are encouraging and nice. I mean, I've just witnessed or heard all these different rounds of funding coming from the Assembly of the Arts. that's not something I've ever heard of before in Cleveland. And in the way that there's unrestricted funding, there seems to be more funding specifically and directly for Cleveland. Cleveland has Rhonda Brown in place right now, so it's. I feel excited about the things that have been announced and that are happening, but some of these things, the fruit hasn't borne out yet. So it's difficult to say. I will say that it feels exciting to be home right now. I feel like I have met all the best people since I ran away from Cleveland. Like, Cleveland was just myself and hundreds of thousands of other young people. We ran out of the city. We didn't see a place for ourselves. We didn't see an opportunity for ourselves. And I would always run into people from Cleveland every place I went, and they were doing fantastic work. They were being supported in their work. They're being recognized, and they were from Cleveland. And we were like, wow. So, I have been telling people who ran away to come home. Come to Cleveland, bring your talents back.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because you talk about Rhonda Brown. Well, Rhonda was a Chicago person. She left Cleveland. She came back. You talk about the Assembly for the Arts. Jeremy Johnson was in Newark, New Jersey, and he came back. When you talk about the funding opportunities that are coming through the Assembly, I just want to make it known and set the record on that, because we are in the midst of this Transformative Art Fund. I'm sure you've heard about it. I'm on the committee that's involved in making the selections of who gets the money and who does what and all that good stuff. But what I need to mention about that is that this was an unusual opportunity as a result of funding that came to Cleveland from the American Rescue Plan Act. And the artist community actually lobbied to receive that funding. Jeremy Johnson was one of those people. I was one of those people who was standing on the floor of Cleveland City Council and imploring them to give us some money to do some work with art. So we did all the pleading. They decided to give us $3 million, and we're doing the best that we can with it. But what has to happen now that we've taken this huge step is now we have to look at other ways to create funding for the arts. What's going to happen in November is there is going to be a levy for the renewal of the cigarette tax, because that has been the sole, well, I won't say it's the sole, but it's been one of the primary drivers for funding for the arts in Cleveland and Cuyahoga County. But that has to change. The city got that gift. Now the city needs to look at doing what they can to continue the legacy of what Rhonda is doing, because I'm going to tell you, after having seen the projects that were submitted and so forth and so on, there are some great ideas, great energy, and solutions. And when you look at how artists work, we create solutions to problems. The legislators write policy, but artists come up with solutions. So what needs to happen is that the legislators need to find ways to empower artists to do things that will make a difference in, the way this city is. You mentioned the experience in your gallery of somebody coming in and seeing the artwork and it touching them when it came to the subject of domestic violence. And to me, that is an indication of the power of art. We cannot underestimate it. Okay. So I'm going to step down from the soapbox. But again, there are things in motion right now, and we're really hopeful that some other things will develop that will enable us to give artists more of a role in transforming this city forward and bringing people together, because that's another thing that art does. You can sit next to somebody from Rocky River when you're at that concert at the Cleveland Museum of Art, or if you're at Wade Oval, or if you're at the Beachland Ballroom. Just like back in the day when Leo's Casino was at 75th and Euclid, you had the same thing. Young people, old people coming in, appreciating the music performing the magic that it does for audiences. This is my thing. And I've been saying it. I'm going to have to go ahead and do it. But I want to trademark the slogan, art is the answer.
I agree. It's the answer, the opportunity. And art is a language. And art is not limited to paper and paint and I mean, there's performance artists, there's music, there's so much. I think that Cleveland has struggled to attract a diverse audience to many of their institutions. And so we see that a lot. We hear that a lot. But you have to have these on roads. You have to have spaces within communities that are going to attract people. And then you can say, oh, hey, come with me to the Cleveland Museum of Art to see X, Y, and Z, or, but you have to have these spaces in communities. That's the thing that I'm interested in. Cleveland has just over $40,000 vacant lots. They have all of this commercial space that's underutilized. I think these are spaces that have to have something creative and artistic, or you're not going to grow your audience. You're not going to grow the people who will buy tickets to Severance Hall or to these other, institutions until you have some on-ramps for them to engage with artists in different spaces. And again, I am experimenting, and shout out to Deep Roots. They're doing this wonderful work. And to be honest, there's so many other spaces and places in Cleveland. I'm actually impressed. Sometimes when I talk to people, there's a lot of complaining and things, but I'm actually somewhat impressed, to be honest with you. Do I think more can happen? I do. But I think that even someone like myself, I'm in a weird spot because what am I? Who am I? I don't really qualify for any of the funding that's been announced because I'm not exactly an artist. I'm someone that is an art appreciator. I'm someone that is really a bit of a historian in a sense that I want to capture the masters of Cleveland and give them space. We started to talk about this a little earlier, but I think one of the main challenges is the lack of representation. I've worked with a lot of different artists who have agents, who have representatives. It's, galleries and museums, they're not interested in talking to an artist about their artwork. They want to negotiate with someone that is a representative. And a lot of our senior artists, they simply don't have that. One of the gallerists that I really enjoy spending time with and talking with is Stella Jones, who's in New Orleans. Again, she represents African-American masters, and most of the artists that she represents are older than 60. Some are in their 80s. And her gallery is really quite successful because there is an audience for that particular, those particular artists. And so, again, I think that when I've talked to some of these artists about representation, they just don't get it. They think it's another bill. They don't think they're going to get much from it. But it's the way that the world works, at this point. So they need spaces to show and they need representation. They need support with that.
You have to be willing to give up that 10% to get the other 90. So get the agent, get your work sold. One thing before we break, I just want to mention, you said that you weren't an artist, and I've heard Dave Ramsey over at Deep Roots say the same thing. I've heard Deirdre McPherson say that over the Assembly of the Arts. For the Arts, she's not an artist. But what I will say is that you are artists because you curate. And in curating, you create a palette for folks to receive art. So I'm going to go ahead and wave the magic wand and tap it on your shoulder and say, Antunesia Harris is an artist. Okay? Know it and own it. This is Open Door with Vince Robinson on 95.9 FM WOVU, Burton Bell Car Community Radio. We'll be right back.
This is DJ Chris Dowles, Programs and Music Director here at WOVU 95.9 FM. Our Voices United, a Burton Bell Car Community Radio Station. WOVU 95.9 FM sends a big thank you to the entire staff of the St. Luke's Foundation and President and CEO Timothy Tramble for awarding WOVU 95.9 FM $25,000 to purchase the WOVU 95.9 FM mobile vehicle. On behalf of our entire team, our Executive Director, Joy Johnson, and Executive Board, we said thank you, St. Luke's Foundation, for continuing addressing social determinants of health for our people in our neighborhoods and throughout Cuyahoga County. Thank you. This message is being brought to you by WOVU 95.9 FM, Our Voices United, a Burton Bell Car Community Radio Station.
We're rounding third and heading home, the fourth and final segment of Open Door with Vince Robinson. I'm having a conversation with Antunesia Harris. She is the owner of Invigorate Hough. It is a gallery over on Hough Avenue in the heart of Hough, what some folks call Midtown. But, there were uprisings that happened there back in the 60s, and everyone remembers those. It is Hough. Leave no doubt about that. You're seeing kind of a transformation of the neighborhood. I know there were some new residential spaces created over there on Chester, or between Chester and Hough, condos and single family units, and then you started seeing single family homes pop up here and there. I know if you drive down Chester Avenue, you can see what really amount to mansions, and black folk are living in them. But you all are also seeing kind of an infusion of folks from outside coming into these communities. A month or so ago, I was at 79th and Euclid, and I noticed some Tesla charging stations, and I'm thinking, wow, that's kind of odd. There aren't any Teslas charging right now, but they are saving space so that when they do move in, they will have somewhere to charge their car. I hate to tell them, though, some people get the wrong idea. They might be dismantling those things to get the copper out of. I don't want to put that out there, but you never know. What are you seeing in terms of changes in your neighborhood, if any?
Oh, wow. So on my end, this is gentrification episode like 4 for me. I'm seeing what always happens. I'm seeing what always happens. And what I'm not seeing, though, I'm not seeing the community organizing around gentrification that I think is necessary to be impactful. Let's keep in mind, I think sometimes people in Cleveland they don't fully understand. Cleveland has fresh water. We have water. We have a lake. We have Lake Erie. You are seeing people in California, Arizona, who are moving as a result of the climate crisis. Cleveland, when I say anything about the climate crisis, people look at me. They don't understand we don't have bad weather. What we do have is we do have fresh water. We do have land that is completely and entirely undervalued. We do have a city that is impoverished. And so you have people that are moving, that are selling their 2-bedroom bungalow in Los Angeles for $2.5 million, and they're paying cash for a $500,000 mansion in Shaker, and putting money in it. Or they're suddenly investors. You have Wall Street that is now buying up a tremendous amount of property, and so I think that Cleveland has had just this. Just really, we haven't had as much development as other cities. And so the city is looking at this is great. We have developers coming in. I too think this is great. You have developers, but where are the protections around the people who already live here? I just haven't seen any of that. I also think that, issues that are immediately in our lives are the ones that we focus on. And so there's these immediate issues of how do I put food on the table? People are dealing with that. Again, with the mansions that are in the Hough neighborhood, you're still talking about the average income is less than $25,000 for a family of 4. And that average income is really more like $20,000, right? And so I think that you have to have spaces and places to talk about issues at a higher level. Those do not exist. I would like to be a space where that happens, where we can actually tie in some of these bigger issues into what's happening directly to the people themselves.
Yes.
And what am I seeing? I know. Let me try to because it's just tough. I see people with resentment. I see people having conversations. Oh, they're taking over our neighborhood, or why are these Teslas charging stations being built here? there's reasons for all of it. I mean, there's answers. I mean, so I don't know. But again, that when you don't have spaces where people can gather naturally, it's really hard to get a sense of what you're seeing and what's going on. One of the places that I really admire a lot is Busboys and Poets in DC. This is a space where there's a bookstore, there's a restaurant, there's performance space. And anything that's happening in the world, you can go there and have a conversation with someone. I mean, there's going to be films that are shown. I think that here in Cleveland, Third Space is great at doing some of that work. And I believe that there are many other spaces, but we do need more. And we need them in communities where there's nothing there. I think that's what I'm interested in. I'm interested in being in places and communities where there's just not a lot there. When I first bought that building in Hough, there wasn't a whole lot around, and suddenly there's all these cool things going on. And it's very interesting in the sense that when I first purchased that building, the goal was to renovate, and I went after funding to renovate, which was just a loan that I qualified for in DC, but I did not qualify for in Cleveland. So that redlining is It really, like someone like me who's not even a profit driven, I'm not even thinking about a profit. I'm thinking about how can we ensure that people who have small businesses can have space that they can afford. Myself, I lived in the U Street area of DC, and what I noticed is the owners of the buildings, the Black owners of the buildings who bought those buildings in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, they were able to allow the karate school to pay $1,000 for rent when the person downstairs who has a liquor store is paying $30,000 a month. And I asked the guy, like, how can you do this? And he said, hey, the building is paid for. I think that guy is doing good work in the community and I want him to stay. That's sort of where I am. I mean, we have to have owners of commercial space that would actually value a bike shop in the neighborhood and charge someone that has a small business that doesn't generate as much money a lower rate of rent. So, on my end, what I'm seeing is I'm not seeing enough people of color own commercial space in Cleveland. I'm not seeing enough people of color that are interested in social entrepreneurship. And I think you and I have talked a lot about color, and it's really weird with me because I don't know that I'm as attached to color as I am to mission. I am not under any impression that if someone is not an African-American person, that they can't be supportive of African-American causes legitimately and without malice. I think that's very possible because it's mission focused. So again, when I think about what happened on U Street, I mean, at this point, there are very few Black-owned businesses that are in commercial spaces that are not owned by Black people. And that's what happens in gentrification. And, the people that own the space sort of determine what happens in the neighborhood and in the community. That was my primary reason. For myself, I looked at what was happening with Mansfield Frazier with his vineyard, and my heart just skipped a beat. It's like, oh, my God, I want to be a part of something like this. This is fantastic. I looked at what was happening in Chicago with the Esther Gates, and I thought, oh, my God, this is fantastic. I want to be a part of something like this. And it's a lot challenging because, again, it's not a model that I think banks are accustomed to and funders are accustomed to. And so where does the money come from to do these things? And on my own, I've been willing to spend my own money, but it takes a lot. It takes a whole lot. So again, I think that having more spaces that are like yours, that are like Deep Roots, that are like mine, there needs to be some way to support developing spaces such as these, because they are the on-roads to the Cleveland Museum of the Arts. They are the on-road to Severance Hall. I mean, this is the way you're going to build your subscription base. This is the way you're going to have people purchase tickets to shows, because they will understand what this experience is to engage with artistic practice and artists.
Yes. Well, I thought about a couple of things as you were speaking. One is we don't really have a wealth of Black developers, and that's an issue. Number two, there has to be a Black philanthropy as well, because I don't know if you know this, but Cleveland is actually the second highest amount of philanthropy in the whole country. It's right here in Cleveland. I think it probably started with Rockefeller. A lot of the folks who have millions and millions and perhaps billions of dollars, sometimes they do things to assuage their consciences. Sometimes they do things to gain favor among the public. I know that Bill Gates is someone who did that. All of a sudden now you got the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and they're giving up all this money. At the same time, they're wreaking havoc around the globe. And I don't want to go into that rabbit hole, but, that's a reality. But I also wanted to mention that we also have to look at what we can do, like what you're doing, like what David is doing in terms of creating these spaces. And typically what happens in areas like Hough is, your grandparents bought that home, they paid for it, everything. And then you, as someone who is offspring, get charged with custodianship of that property, and you don't want to be bothered with it, so you sell it. So then somebody from out of town buys that property, and then they sit on it until they can get a nice, huge chunk of change from a developer, and then that investment pays off. We have to retain the spaces that we work so hard to get, and we can't blame anyone but ourselves when we walk away from those things because we're too lazy to take responsibility for it. I just wanted to say that.
May I say this?
Yes.
I hear this story. But here's the reality. You're left with grandma's home. This is great. You have great memories in this home. This home needs a new roof. Because this is what happened with one of my grandmother's homes. Her home needed a new roof. Her home needed some repairs. She paid $35,000 for the house in, I don't know, the 80s, let's say. And in 2014, the house was worth $12,000. And so there's no opportunity to borrow from the equity to get a new roof. And so what do? Mm-hmm. You let it fall in, or do you put it on the market for $25,000? So I think that there's a lot of nuance in this story that we tell about what happens in our communities, because there are people who want to do things. The funding's not there. Look at me again. I'm someone that qualified for $300,000 worth of loans in D.C. and qualified for nothing in Cleveland because I was told that the land where my building was worth nothing. I'm the same person. Mm-hmm. I'm the same person, and all I did was, travel six hours away.
Yes.
So there's a lot of nuance, and I think that what's the real story? Where are the places to understand the real and the true story? Everyone is just simply not going to go to a community meeting. It's just not going to happen. And plus, they happen right after work. But we have to have spaces where that's just a part of the dynamic in the space. Mm-hmm. You generally can see things like that happening in bookstores or coffee shops, or where people, it's not the place where the meetings are happening, but it's places where the conversations are happening. It's the places where someone can then say, hey, let's get together and do this. There's just not enough of them in our neighborhoods. Yes. Then I think that, again, that is a problem. Yes. We have to have natural spaces for communication.
Right. We have to have the communication, and we have to have the plans of action, just so that it's not talk. It's also doing something about the issue. And I'll go out on a limb and say, you're not just talking about it, you're doing it. I congratulate you and encourage you to continue to do that, as shall I. Antunesia Harris, our time has gotten past us. We have just a few more moments left. Let everyone know that they can find your gallery at 6500 Hough Avenue, and stop by. Is there a website or a Facebook page you want to let them know about?
So this is the thing. I'm highly experimental, and I need to stop that. And so there's nothing at this point. But I'm inviting people who want to help build this thing out with me to reach out. I'm happy to give my email address, which is antunesia.harris@gmail.com. I'm typically there on Fridays. I'm there, different times, but on Fridays, I make myself available from about 4 p.m. to about 7 p.m. So yeah, stop by, give me a call, send me an email. If you want to just talk a bit more about experimenting with this space in Hough. One of the things before we go, Vince, I do want to shout out to
quickly, because
Carmen.
we got 20 seconds.
Okay, I want to shout out to Carmen Lane. So I stopped by her project the other day and had this wonderful conversation with an artist, Amos, who was visiting from Detroit. So thank you so much, Vince, for inviting me to have this conversation.
All right. Thank you so much for being here for that conversation, and I look forward to bringing you some art from Africa very soon. To those who are listening, as always, know yourself, love yourself, be yourself. Make today your best day. Peace.